always think of 2 to 3 things, Brett, that would be worse. So whenever there's a challenge going on in my life, and again, this is just my gut reaction, I can think of 3, 4, 5 things that are worse than what I'm doing. And when I do that, I tend to appreciate, no matter how bad it is, I tend to appreciate whatever little joy that I can glean from whatever experience.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every single day with a mindset and practice of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more or all of it away to help MVPs. I'm your host today, Brett Swartz. In every episode, we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires. They share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach the next level of success, faith, and impact. Hey, I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the great state of Georgia in the Atlanta area. And he is on a mission to help all of us as entrepreneurs, maximize the value of our businesses. And he is the CEO of ESL Advisors, and he's a nationally recognized M&A negotiator and serial entrepreneur. He's advised and negotiated on more than $1 billion of deal value, as well as personally built and sold 4 businesses in all different verticals, and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Lee Heisman. Lee, how we doing?
Brett, how are you doing today? Thank you. What a great introduction.
Thank you, sir. I'm doing well too, and grateful to have you on the show. And for our listeners, get to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Sure. You always look for guidance and advice from people, and you have to monitor where that guidance and advice is coming from. And, I've been an entrepreneur now for over 30 years, and I've had multiple businesses, grown them, bootstrapped them myself all the way up, grown businesses to as large as 150 employees with a $50 million top line, to as small as just a few employees with a few $1 million top line. But the size, that wasn't the juice for me. The juice was growing businesses. And I was fortunate, Brett, over the past 30 years to grow my businesses and go out and sell my businesses myself. And you know the old adage, right? You don't know what you don't know. But when you're an entrepreneur like myself and you have successful exits and you do it yourself, you think, I'm that smart, I can do this. And then you realize very quickly, as I said, you don't know what you don't know. So that was kind of the impetus 4 years ago for my partner and I to open up our current firm, Exit Stage Left Advisors, our ESL company.
Amazing. By the way, you can learn more about Lee even right now by going to esladvisors.com. That's esladvisors.com. But hey, Lee, before we dive into the episode, which is how to maximize the value of your business, the title of the episode, I do want to take one other step back. I believe you've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given to us to be a blessing and help to others. So what would you say is Lee's, natural maybe gift or strength or two that you were given, and how does it help how you help and bless people today?
So, Brett, I love that because your show is all about giving back, right? How do you grow the wealth to give back? And I'll tell you, this is not my opinion. This is the normal mantra that I hear from people when I leave them is my energy, my positivity. You have to go through adversity. And with respect, we could spend 5 hours on a podcast or video like this talking about all the problems because that's where you really grow from. But I would tell you that I hear consistently from people that I always have a positive outlook. And by the time that I meet somebody to the time that I leave, their energy level is 5x. The smile on their face is 5x. If I can help them with business, that's a byproduct. But the energy and the positivity that I can put into somebody's life, that's always those special moments multiple times a day for me.
Amazing. Okay, that's fantastic. I'm already sensing that too. So this is great. So let's focus that energy, right, to helping the entrepreneur who's listening right now, and he's wondering, man, how do I best maximize the value of my business? And so, what's the number one secret lead to doing just that?
Sure. So I will just give a little step back, Brett, real quick, and talk about the fact that learn from my mistakes of my own sales. And over the past 4 years, our firm, 10 full-time people, we've conducted over 41 transactions over the past 4.5 years. So we're very fortunate to be in this space, and we have a lot of experience, Brett. We're also agnostic with who we give guidance to in terms of their industry. So that's a high-level question about maximizing the enterprise value of your firm. I mean, first and foremost is you have to be growing the company. I have a lot of people that come to us to represent them to sell their business when they're burnt out, Brett. They say, hey, my numbers are flat, they're down, I'm burnt out. It's time for me to sell. And isn't that funny? Because if you're a buyer, why would you want to buy something that's flat and going down? And people, they don't look at it from the outside perspective, from the buyer's perspective. So grow your business because a buyer not only wants to see your trend, what's happened the past few years, they want to know where you're going to.
Okay, that makes perfect sense, right? The best time to negotiate is when you don't need to negotiate. The best time to sell is when you're growing the company, it sounds like. And now when it's flatlined and you're burnt out and it's an afterthought, right? Is that a fair summary so far?
That is the worst time to sell. And Brett, that's the problem for entrepreneurs. If you're an entrepreneur out there listening to this right now, when you're making good money and you're growing, why on God's green earth would you want to sell? And that's where you have to do a reflection internally and find what I call that Goldilocks moment. Not too early, not too late, just the right time. And it's hard. It's hard to say I'm in a tremendous growth phase and I'm going to actually sell the business. But remember, Brett, there's two pieces to a business. There's the enterprise value of the business, and the other piece of the deal is the structure of the business. And people tend to forget about the structure. They sometimes just think of the dollars and cents. You know, when you talk about structure, you could roll equity, Brett. You could say, hey, I want to take chips off the table, maybe clear the deck a little bit of my risk, because most entrepreneurs are big risk takers and they put a lot of money into their business. And maybe you roll 10, 20, 30% equity with the acquisition from a private equity company and take a second or third bite of the apple down the road. So there's many ways to skin a cat and many ways for you to sell your business at the right time.
Yeah, I think like Tony Robbins' example of a 1 degree shift of thought or insight, right? And sometimes it's realizing that, hey, I don't have to sell the whole enchilada, right? I can structure this in a way where I can continue to reap, especially that benefit of what I've built without feeling like I'm just walking away from that. So it sounds like enterprise value, which is the current value and or where it's going, and then the structure of it, how you can capture the upside of the value. Is that a fair summary so far?
100%. And I will tell you the structure for certain clients of ours and sellers. I always say sometimes it's 51% is the enterprise value, the money means a little bit. Other times it's 51% that the structure means a lot more to somebody than the actual dollars and cents. And remember, buyers, whether it be private equity, family offices, these are the majority of the buyers that we work with. And Brett, we've cultivated nearly 1,000 buyers across the country that we built an intimate relationship with. So we understand where the money is. We understand where the committed capital is, because you may have a great business, Brett. You may go into the market, but if you have someone that wants your business but can't afford to pay it or doesn't have any money, you're wasting your time.
Okay, that's good insight there. And it sounds like also as well, I think you said a key little thing there. You said clear the deck of risk, right? At some point, it's time to harvest because it's going to help you clear some of that risk that's involved. Also, perhaps even risk of just overgrowing too fast. Like you might have outgrown your senior leadership, your team, and your expertise. And so if you stay on the trajectory, talk to us a little bit about that type of risk, not just, hey, am I going to make sure I capture, enough, money to be able to retire and be able to, have this passive lifestyle? Like talk about the risk of not allowing new expertise to come in to help you go to the next level.
Well, that's kind of when you go to market, you have to look internally first before you go out. So number one, are you going to market because you have a business that is 5 million to 8 million, 10 million of EBITDA? Do you have a very large, significant business where you're going to be a platform and people are going to acquire under you? Usually, Brett, when you have a business that's above 5 million of EBITDA, you already have that infrastructure for growth. Now you're simply looking to propel this as a rocket ship. If you're under 5 million of EBITDA, anywhere from a half a million to 2.5 or 3 million, you're exactly right. That's usually the breaking point where you may not have that internal staff or that internal structure to grow it. So you're looking for a buyer or partner, as we call it, that already has that infrastructure, and we call it aggregation. Other people that are in your particular sleeve. If you own an HVAC company or a plumbing company or any industry that I can mention, people will create. And just for our viewers out there, it's really important they understand this. The way that private equity works is they will go out into the market for upwards of a year, spend anywhere, Brett, from a half a million to $1 million. These are all the stories I'm told by all of the firms we work with, and they create what is called a thesis. And this thesis may be a roofing platform thesis, an HVAC thesis, a technology software thesis. And what they do is they check all the boxes, Brett. An example of box checking would be if it was a roofing thesis, they want companies that have under 20% new construction, under 20% commercial, because they create create that aggregation that they're going to build this entire platform off of. And then you get the economies of scale. So if you're in that business of growing between the half a million to $2-3 million of EBITDA, it is a really nice fit to find an aggregator that has that infrastructure built. You bolt into it, and then you grow with them when you roll some equity.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I think a simplified way to me think about that as an analogy is be able to sell on Amazon versus creating the Amazon, right? You have the business, you have the product, you have the thing, and it's like if you can plug into that, it's going to maximize and scale. Is that a fair summary so far?
100%.
Okay, great. What's the next best secret to making sure that you maximize the value of your business?
So if you are a business owner and you do not have a good G2, and I'm going to use that term G2, meaning generation two. If you don't have a second generation within your office, how are you exactly going to get out of that business? What's the value if it's the Brett show, right? Show if it's maybe this is the Brett show today, but if you had a business, Brett, that was growing and scaling and making hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, but it's still all on your shoulders, the acquisition and the value is going to be a lot less than if Brett had mini Bretts or many versions of you all over the business. So really preparing and scaling for, as you know, the old adage, you running and operating you running and owning the business versus operating the business on a daily basis. That's a really valuable component.
Absolutely. And I can't help but think about even just, stewardship over ownership and passing on, making your family successful for generations, helping to make the business successful for generations. And if it doesn't have that family component and that connection there, and I guess you're not even necessarily just saying Gen 2 as in like generational family, it's actually the leadership that's within inside of that, right? So talk
That's what
about
I
the
meant by
difference
Gen
between
2.
those two and how you help to navigate people through that.
Yeah, so I actually wasn't thinking family. It could be family, but the generation two is really that second form of leadership. I agree 100%. If I'm introduced to people that are looking at a trajectory of a year, if some people want to go out to market today, we can deal with what we have, Brett. We'll find a way to make it work. You may not maximize your enterprise value, but if you do want to maximize it and we have a year or two of runway, you need to take the time to fill that generation two, the mini version of yourself that when you leave, it can happen there.
Got it. That makes perfect sense, right? It's diversifying the risk that's involved for the buyer because, right, once you leave, it creates that vacuum. And the question is, what leaders are going to step in to fill that or and be able to run that, or are they going to have to need you, right? And so you've got to have that in place. Generation two, second form of leadership. By the way, you can learn more about everything we are talking about today by going to esladvisors.com, esladvisors.com, and Lee Heisman is who we're speaking with today. Okay, so that makes sense. Now, what would maybe the next best secret that you could think of right now for
Sure.
how to
So
maximize the value of the business?
now I want you to look at your business, and not every business is built this way, Brett, but I want you to think when you're dealing with private equity and family offices, when you're dealing with qualified buyers, what do they like? Again, I want you to think of things on the other person's vantage point. They like the big term here, predictability, because they know what they're investing in. I want you to think, and I was speaking at a conference, Brent, in San Diego not long ago, in the room of 1,000 people, not one person raised their hand. I looked at the room and I was talking about these topics and I said, when is the last time you changed your pest control company? I just want you to think about that predictability. Now, maybe there's a reason once in a blue moon, but most people don't change their landscape or their pest control, their HV. Once you get these blue collar, wonderfully needed mission critical businesses working, if I'm buying one of those, I know that my numbers are going to be the same. Contracts, Brett. Contracts and recurring revenue is a very valuable tool for people as they grow their business. And I'll take 30 seconds and run through a quick story. It was one of my favorite examples of failure. We, Brett, have been very successful and fortunate. Not only have we sold every business that we've represented, it has taken time sometimes, but we've always also batting 1,000 for getting multiple offers. So there's one client, I'll use the analogy because we're in the World Series now, or soon to be in the World Series, where we're still at bat fouling off pitches. So we're still batting 1,000, but 2 years ago we had a client, their EBITDA, Brett, their profits, $3.5 million, should not be an issue selling their business. They taught you how to sell reused books. I'm not going to mention names, but they taught you how to sell reused books, used books on Amazon. It's quite a business. We went into the marketplace. We had 7 qualified buyers come to the table, meeting after meeting, and after a year, we had 0 offers. So this was our first time we were running into this. And we went with our client and said, listen, this is what the market is telling us. The market says you are losing 70% of your clientele every 8 months. Just a recycle of people. They would stay with you maybe upwards of 8 months to a year, but you were losing 70% of your client every 8 months. We said, listen, we put you in the market. We're unsuccessful. We're very sorry that we failed you. Brett, the nice thing is we're success fee based. So no one pays us in advance. We pick and choose our clients and we hand select them. So, hey, no harm, no foul. The client looked at us, Brett, and said, you know what, Lee and Ted? We love you guys. We're not going anywhere. And unbeknownst to you, since we got all this input, we have changed the model of our business. We are now requiring our clients to sign 12, 24, and 36-month agreements. And actually, Brett, we're putting them in the market in another month, putting that in the market. I'm so excited to see how it goes because the buyer can now buy predictability. So they didn't have that originally in their business, but they were able to change their business model, pivot, because the market told them where their weakness was. So if you can create some level of predictability in your business, it will exponentially skyrocket the value.
That is gold right there. I think that's really key. So contracts and recurring revenue, right? And really so that what you're providing predictability for the buyer, right? Predictability for the lender who's going to be lending to the buyer to help to maximize the value of the sale of your business. And so the fact that they put 12, 24-month contracts in place and they listened and now you're going back to market and perhaps, in 6 or 12 months when you sell the business, you can come back and share that success story of how it all went down if this goes well.
Yeah, Brett, I'm going to send them to you to share the success story. You don't want to hear it from me. You're probably listening to me long enough today, but I'll definitely bring them on the show. And I do have to comment on one other really important component, not just for maximizing the enterprise value, which that was the original question, just getting a deal done. So people, Brett, think, hey, I'm ready to sell. Suddenly I can just sell, right? I'm going down the street and buying a taco or selling something at a garage. It doesn't work like that. You can't even begin all these other pieces if you don't have a tight set of financials. If you do not have your financials set to some extent of profit and loss and balance sheet, number one, you obviously have to use a great accounting firm where whatever city you're located in, use someone to make sure you're keeping up on your taxes. But number two, and maybe even a 1B and a 1C before I get to number two, is your own internal analysis. I'm going to use roofing as an example. When you're doing sales of roofing, is it commercial? Is it residential? What products are you? The more that you can analyze the types of sales that you have, in addition to having a clean set of books to watch trends, I know as a business entrepreneur, it's really tough because you're out there just running full steam ahead, trying to earn as much revenue as you can, pay your bills accordingly. And when the dust settles, there's some money left over and you get to put that in your pocket, give it to your accountant, pay your taxes. But I want you to remember, if you're going into the marketplace, the tighter your financials are, the more self-evaluative you are with your financials, the easier and cleaner it will be for us to maximize that value when the time comes. Because you really want to showcase how good you are at your business, how diversified you are.
Yeah, think about the Shark Tank, part of the show where they walk in and they go through all the things and they start getting into the numbers. And those that don't know the numbers or are unclear on the numbers or understand what the numbers mean tend to not get the deal, right? Think about it. Those are buyers being sharks, right? Looking to make a deal to buy into or buy the business. And that is foundational. So great accounting firm, tight set of P&Ls, know your numbers and know your internal analysis, everybody who's listening to this.
Isn't it almost cringy when you're watching it and you feel very bad for the people? And unbeknownst, Brett, you may know this. I know this. I've had many associates that have been on that particular show. I've had the fortune of meeting the Sharks themselves. Did you know that each pitch was over 3 hours long? I don't know if you're aware of that or not.
I was not. No, that's
Oh,
news to
yeah.
me.
2.5 to 3 hours minimum. You see, 6 minutes or whatever the highlights are. So they're in there going through everything. They just grab some highlights. It's a minimum of 2.5 to 3 hours each individual pitch. So do know your information. And don't be embarrassed to bring documentation with you. I've never seen someone pull out paper with them, but the reality is if I'm a buyer, as I deal with buyers all day long, it's okay to say, I don't know, let me get you that answer, or let me look this up real quick for you. You can't know every single question, but definitely practicing and being grilled so you don't have those cringeworthy moments. And that's not just on the Shark Tank. That's actually in life when you're dealing with the buyer.
That's in real life, everybody. Again, we're speaking with Lee Heisman. You can learn more about Lee by going to esladvisors.com, elsadvisors.com. They're exit stage left advisors, maximize multiples, minimize stress, help you to negotiate, list and sell your business. Perfect. Okay, so What question haven't I asked, or what would be the next step to maximizing the value that you want to take us to, Lee?
Sure. So, part of our slogan, we talk about maximizing value, is also minimizing the stress. And it's using third party organizations, such as your CPA firm, such as potentially a business growth expert. We don't offer those things. But, Brett, if you're really, really good at making your widget, whatever business that you're in, don't hesitate to utilize the professionals to help craft your business better. So, that internal self evaluation I speak of, that's probably the biggest weakness of most entrepreneurs, just because, as I said, most are top line, bottom line, pay my taxes, I put the rest in my bank account. Top line, bottom line, pay my taxes, I put the rest in my bank account. And there's nothing wrong with that philosophy until we go to the market to sell.
Okay. That being said, I do want to touch on this now, Lee. I'm curious on this, right? Talk about the importance of third party experts, right? Business growth experts. What about the business exit expert? Not just the one who's helping to sell to maximize the value, but as it pertains to capital gains tax. So, what would you say is the biggest frustration when you're working with these sellers, Lee? They're all ready to go. They're all excited. You get the offers, and they haven't necessarily maybe done the work or really counted the cost of this capital gains tax. And they're in the New York, the New Jersey, the California, and it's 20, 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60% on these C Corps. They're about to get crushed with capital gains tax, Lee. And they go, Lee, you know what? I've decided that it's just not worth the trouble. I don't want to pay this tax, right? So talk to strategies or ways that you've been able to, I don't know, guide or thoughts
No, great.
how do you structure things in a ways to help with the capital gains tax?
So, Brett, first off, I think this is your area of expertise. So I'm really excited to hear your take on it. And I was going to do my best. I have no talent whatsoever, but one of my favorite movies is the Hugh Jackman. I actually flew to New York City to watch him in the Broadway musical Music Man. Ever since watching him in the movie, that happens to be your favorite as well. I can't watch it enough with the kids. And I will make one little shout out. I'm being in Atlanta. Well, I'm 53 now, my first 27 years. And I apologize to anybody listening. I'm a Yankee from Philly. So thank you a couple years ago for San Fran to let us win when the quarterback went down, and then you guys taught us a lesson last year. So I watched the game last night. I just looked at your background. I loved it. It tells you about people, and I'm the terrible Philly fan, I guess you could say, which is quite funny. You guys have a great team in San Fran. I took us offline, sorry, as I go back to this. So the cap gains is a great point because right now it's really funny. I have people that are questioning if they want to sell their business today, and it's happened this year. And I turn and say, let me give you a quick example because right now we're talking about 20% cap gains in our country today. Forget the state tax in California, which is amazing, and I won't criticize it. But people say, well, I might want to wait a year or two. And I'm like, well, let me run the numbers. And you'd have to sell your business today for $20 million to net, just from a federal perspective, $16 million if you lived in Tennessee or Texas or Florida with no state tax. You'd have to effectively, if the Biden's budget, which he stated and documented 44.6, it could be as high as 44.6 next year. I don't think it'll make it there. But if that went into effect, you'd have to sell the same exact business, Brett, for $30 million to net the same $16 million. Now, we could argue who's going into government. We could argue that you have a red house, a blue house, a Senate, whatever it may be. Here's what I won't argue, and no one ever challenges this. I will bet the farm on the fact that the cap gains tax going forward will not be decreasing. That's what I will bet the farm on. It will not be decreasing. So if you're looking at exiting a business, I would guess, in my professional opinion, and I do this every day, you've got a good 18-month runway, at least till the end of 2026 before any capital gains is enacted, I guess you could say. And you know this, Brett, better than anybody. They could enact an increase in capital gains in November of next year, and they could legally retro it to the beginning of the year. But historically, that has never happened. That has never happened. So I would go all in on the fact that the rate's not going to go down. It is going to go up. I will not bet the amount that it's going to go up, irregardless of whichever political side gets into candidacy and where we stand on the right and left of the House and the Senate. But I will tell you, if there is any time, and I don't push people to sell, Brett, this is where you maximize what you put in your pocket. Because, ladies and gentlemen, enterprise value is one thing. What you're putting in your pocket is a whole nother thing. And that's where you can go into charitable remainder trusts and all these components that are part of the LOI and part of our process. but I'm glad you jumped into it. I usually don't go into this level of detail, Brett. I love give me your comments, please. I'm all about this.
Oh, thank you, Lee. First of all, I think that's great clarity on it, right? Because if you have a $20 million asset and then today's capital gains tax rates, right, it's going to be about 16 million. And if certain laws get changed and things get passed, it could be the same business need to be 30 million to get 16 with the strikes of some pins and some signing of some stuff. And so you got to be aware of the opportunity cost for capital gains tax increase, right? And what that means for you. Now, all that being said, I get this comment quite a bit. Well, Brett, should I just pay the tax today because it's going to be more later? And I'm like, yeah, it's likely to be more later. But I would ask you this. I say to Mr. Business Owner, well, and 20% are for the few states that are, the Floridas, the Texas, a few of them that have no state cap gains tax. But I go, look, whether it's 20% that you're paying, 30, 40, 50, or I've even seen some this much, it's just 65% as a C Corp getting doubled, getting on the exit tax in California of your proceeds. What if you could defer that and let that compound and multiply for you, right? And so that's usually the mindset that we approach with that. But more than that, we look at it as a way to then compound and go into whatever they're going into. So I always ask the question before we do any kind of planning, right? A, how painful is the tax for you? B, where and how are you going to spend the funds? Where are you going to start a new business? Where are you going to invest into real estate? Do you want to diversify? What's your wealth legacy plan? And so essentially, we try to say what would be an ideal picture 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years down the road. And if we can use the power of compound interest, even if it's just 20%, how much more could we help you maximize and multiply your freedom and impact? And then that becomes, okay, we got that. Then we go to, what is the best strategy for the entrepreneur to do that? And that's where we feel we have a unique niche, because a lot of the strategies are just that. They're strategies, but they're not transformational to the wealth and to the multiplying of freedom and impact. And we found a strategy we call it the deferred sales trust that gives you a lot of flexibility to be an entrepreneur or to be retired, to diversify the wealth, no timing restrictions, to go out of a business into real estate, to go out of real estate into a business, vice versa, or out of Bitcoin or stock. It works for C Corps, S Corps, LLCs, all of these things, right? But the key is, I always say hiring the who, not being the how, right? Hiring the expert. And I'll leave you with this last one here and see what you think here. People spend 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years building a business. And if they just spent five hours, we always say with us, you can have an extra 20, 30, 40, 50, 60% more to work for you and your family for the next X amount of years. It could be 10, 20, 30, you keep going, right? So that's what I'll pass back to you. What are your thoughts? Had you heard of the deferred sales trust?
Of course,
have you heard of this strategy? Yeah.
So first off, stellar information. And I know I don't have to say that for viewers and listeners of your show, they already know your expertise. When you talk about deferred sales trust, you can talk about, CRTs, charitable remainder trust. Mm-hmm. Here's what I'm going to say. So everything you said is valid. I'm going to add a little cherry on top. If you wait too long, everything you said is null and void. What I mean by that is if you think I'm under LOI, I'm in the purchase and sale agreement phase, we're in due diligence, and you start to try to not mess around, but you start to implement these beautiful tax advantages, it's simply too late. And some of them you have to get your buyer on board. These are things that need to be discussed early on. So if you're too late to the game and you're not willing to listen to what you just said, Brett, they're great. You have a front row seat to watch all of Brett's great ideas pass you by, because you will not be able to implement it if you wait too long to implement it in the middle of a deal.
Yeah, so I will edit that a little bit.
Please.
So there's the emotional part and the expertise part, and people get caught because they wait too long to do planning, and there's 30 days to close, and they have their entire M&A team, their CPA, their tax attorneys, their financial advisor, all of these groups that have this contract, you have this buyer who's removing contingencies. And they're going 100 miles down the road, and all of a sudden they're like, "Oh my gosh, this tax!" And then they find me on YouTube, and they find my book, and then now they're rushing it, and they're like, now you're having all the other people hop through all the hoops, and they've done all the work, and then sometimes those who haven't heard of it before, they can see it as a basically a big roadblock or that's going to come and stall the deal. So what we tell everybody is, yes, it's always best to plan your capital gains tax exit plan before you list, before you sign the contracts. That's the cleanest way. However, we have closed deals in 14, 21, 30 days that have been in contract for many, many months. And we have worked with people for multiple years to plan as well. So technically, we can still assign the interest, typically like an LLC or an S Corp, depending on if it's stock sale, asset sale, all those different things, to the trust prior to the closing in exchange for a promissory note. However, Every fact pattern is a little bit different. And Lee is correct. There are certain deals that are written in certain ways that at times can stop or have to have the buyer cooperate, or even worse, the buyer has removed all contingencies. Then it truly is too late. Unless you're in a 1031 exchange and you're selling real estate, which is really not what we're talking about in today's episode. But the best way to plan is to give yourself an option language. In fact, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com, and for no cost, you can email us and we'll give you the option language to provide to the leads and the MA advisors to give you the option and the right to use the deferred sales trust or a charitable remainder trust at no additional cost to the buyer. And that gives you the option to do it. And by the way, it shouldn't affect the buyer. We've seen some people say like, oh, does the buyer really need to cooperate? Well, in the contract, it needs to say that. Really what we're setting up for is the IRS. And the IRS says constructive receipt. And constructive receipt legally happens when the buyer has removed all contingencies, there's nothing holding up, the cash being sent to you personally, or B, the actual cash that was sent to you personally, right? That's what triggers the tax. So technically the legal part is if there's a contingency remaining, we can get it in. But practically speaking, it's a lot. And oftentimes a lot more headaches and a lot more stress. And we want to minimize the stress, as Lee is talking about before, right? To be able to maximize the savings and tax deferral here. So I'll pass it back to you, Lee. Any thoughts on that?
No, first off, that's why we have people like you, Brett. We're exceptional at getting someone from cradle to grave to conduct a transaction, because everybody talks about maximizing their enterprise value, and that is important, but conducting a transaction is actually harder than maximizing the dollar. So you really want to align them to even get a transaction across the line. That's why the qualified buyers that I speak of, we've done transactions with them. We've gone down the road. We understand who's authentic, and I hate to be negative, who's not authentic, and who will waste a lot of your time. Using someone like yourself, I simply defer to that. We are far from the expert. I can speak high level about being prepared and starting to dialogue about that sooner than later. But don't forget, Brett, our clients come in the moment they say, we're ready to engage, we're ready to go to market. That's still a few months away before I even do what we call pocket or whisper listings. We don't list our clients anywhere. They're usually, like I said, our range is usually 2 to 20 million of EBITDA is our sweet spot. Anything under that, it has to be an industry where we can bolt people on. But the reality is the moment they engage us is the moment we're dialoguing about them getting with people like yourself. You have to have that expert there. But you're 100% correct, Brett. If someone gets to the finish line before they sign, you can go back and do anything at that point, and that's just you having to unearth everything, and it does hold up the process. I prefer early on, but you're 100% correct.
Appreciate it. And if people want to learn more about this, you go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. You can check out the book, Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan, on Amazon to learn more about that. Enough about capital gains tax and exit planning. Why don't we shift a little bit more into the lightning round is what we call it. Although, feel free to expand on this. It doesn't have to be a quick answer, but it's going to be, multiple questions coming at you here a little bit quicker than usual.
Sure.
And so, Lee, I'm curious, how do you define stewardship over ownership in the context of leading and building, your business, and how has this mindset contributed to your success?
So, it's really funny. I've been in business for over 30 years, owning my businesses, and I'm fortunate to have had my business partner that we found each other many, many years ago in many things that we're doing. And we don't keep score. We always talk about, the equity of what you give to people and, the bank account of what you give out. And in the bank account of our world, in terms of giving, our checking account doesn't have a number next to it. It's, have you thought of me? Have I thought of you? And we're constant givers. Now, there is a fine line, Brett. We don't mind giving, but someone has to think of you. They have to think back at you. That's all. They have to maybe put you first once in a blue moon. I can think of you, Brett, and give you 10 different leads or advice or guidances. And if you think of me one time, we're good. I'm never keeping track or keeping score. But sometimes some people, I never like to say the word takers. I just say some people aren't aware that that's the way reciprocity works. And in stewardship, I think you have a responsibility to your clientele, to your staff, to everybody but yourself. Because if you have that responsibility given to the community around you, you will get back tenfold. I know we've heard it, but I will say for viewers and listeners out there, I know you've probably heard this 100 times over. Give, give, give. And if you're not getting something back immediately, it is really hard to put your head down and continue to give. And I would just implore you, as you know, Brett, lean into your faith, believe it, and know that I'm going to keep giving because things are coming back to me whether I see them or not.
Perfect. I love that. I was just at the John Maxwell Institute, and he wrote a book called The High Road Leaders. And he said that one of the key components or attributes of a high road leader is not keeping score, right? And it's exactly that. And it's giving, having a mindset of giving, an abundance mindset, and that's a great way. I think it's a great way to be a steward. That's fantastic. Second question. And common sense practices, right? So what are some common sense, practices that you believe are often overlooked in the M&A advising world today?
So, Brett, that's an easy one. And my apologies to pick on people looking at this. I'm fortunate, Brett, as I said, to have traveled the country, do a number of engagements to large crowds. And I always get back, I always put out a little questionnaire afterwards. Was there any topics that I spoke about? And I speak on many topics, Brett, not just M&A, but belief saboteurs, things that people put in their own way. There's a lot of topics that I speak on. And I always get back comments of the things, Brett, that I didn't think were important. That's what's so enlightening to me. It's actually it's very humbling to say, wow, this impacted one person this way, this impacted another person another way. I never saw that as important. So I am going to pitch the same thing that I say. People never write it on the documents. They just look over it because they think it's common sense, but I don't see them do that. And this is a life quality, not just in the M&A space, Brett, but a life quality. Common courtesy. I know that sounds weird. And you're like, Lee, I'm not going to listen to you just tell me to be courteous to people. That's preposterous. I could do that. If you really start putting other people's thoughts in your mind, if you really try to sit in where they're coming from, what's important to them, being considerate. Consideration is so important. Brett, I'm telling you, I'm gonna share this one with you. I'm a big fan of the airplane theory. Remember years ago with the little thing in the sleeve in front of you, and it says, if the oxygen masks fall down, you do not put the oxygen mask on your child first. You put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Because in the middle of me trying to put it on my child, I may lose consciousness. Now we're both done. So if you can take care of one or two of your immediate needs first, then you can focus the remainder of your efforts on everybody else around you. So it's the airplane theory. Don't put the mask on yourself, or put the mask on yourself. Apologize. Don't put it on your child because I could lose consciousness. We both don't have oxygen. We have a bigger issue. So take care of the top one or two things that you might need for the day for me to be empowered and strong. And then spend the rest of the day taking care of everybody else because you're going to get back a ton more.
Okay, that's such wisdom. I feel like that's the book right there, Lee. That's the book.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Take
Yes.
care of the top one and two before you take care of the rest. Like, I think that's huge. Common courtesy makes sense. Being thoughtful, and I feel like a little intentionality compounds, right? And then like a lack of a little of intentionality also like is can feel pretty cold, right? So I think it's so true. Just some common courtesy, other people's thoughts, and makes it's great. It's great. Let's keep moving here. Let's keep moving here. Okay, so we call this the one thing focus question, right? So how do you maintain focus on your one big thing amidst a world of distractions and shiny new opportunities? How do you laser in and really making sure you're practicing that 80-20 rule with the principle basically like, hey, if this 20% makes the biggest impact for myself, for our team, for our clients, and not get distracted by the outside noise.
So I will say this. Not everybody's perfect, as you know. We aren't perfect at all. But I have been fortunate, and I would implore people to do this. You might be a sole practitioner owning a business. You may have partners. I've always been fortunate, Brett, with partners. And weirdly, I've been very fortunate to be a yin and a yang with most of my partners. So, Brett, I'm really, really good at the things that I do. And my partners that I've had in my businesses are really, really good at the things they do. And they're very, very different. So, to be frank with you, I have always offset my weaknesses by finding partners that are exceptional at their particular pieces that they do the opposite. So, in terms of that intentionality and the focus and the structure, I am not good at that. But I have a partner at Exit Stage Left Advisors. That's all he's good at, right? And then he could laugh on the on this Zoom, and he's very personable and fun. But we're very different with the same goals in mind. So because I know, Brett, of my limitation, I lean on him on our weekly meetings with our entire team on the structure and the framework on our business planning for the new year. All those pieces, Brett, that are vitally important to the growth of a business. I mean, I've been successful for the past 30 plus years in spite of myself. Since I've partnered now with my business partner, we're now 10xing this. And vice versa, he would probably say the same because of my ability to use my gut to make decisions that aren't not calculating it, which is what his world normally is. So you put a good mixture together and it's a delicious recipe. You have a little too much salt, a little too much seasoning, and it can be too bitter. So if you can find that right recipe, it works really well.
And this is really great. I love this too, and I'm curious if we can make a little follow up on that. Like, maybe talk about ways that the rhythms and the meetings and the alignment for partners in business, right? And how you best practice that, and be like any wisdom for someone who's like, yeah, I want to 10x my business, and I've considered bringing on this partner, and of course they need to be to complement my skill set. That makes sense, right? And my strengths. But talk about the mission, vision, values, and making sure those align before you get into maybe a business partnership. And this could also be for like strategic alliances too, right? One thing that we're
100%.
practicing is like we got to really make sure that even strategic alliances, the mission, vision, values all align, and we're going to complement, and it's going to be a multiplier effect, right? And taking that slow, because as entrepreneurs sometimes we want to move fast and we want to check that box and keep going with momentum. But just talk about that wisdom along partnerships, strategic alliances, and making sure the values are aligned properly.
So I will share, when I mentioned my partner, I mentioned that this wasn't our first rodeo together. We had done other businesses together that weren't as magnanimous as ESL, right? We're dealing with multi-billion-dollar PE firms on a daily basis. We're dealing with clientele selling businesses from $5 to $200 million. These are significant moves for our clients, and it's everything our clients have worked for. So it's not about the financial piece, it's their whole life, right? So when I say that, I step back to say that we've done other businesses together that maybe might not have been as magnanimous to at least get that mission statement together, Brett. We had some batting practice, some reps, as you'd call it. So if you're looking at a partnership, you're looking at maybe even just a not business partnership legally, but also, as you said, some key partners. Start working on things together to see if your mission is aligned, to see if your faith driven is aligned. You have to take that batting practice to realize you're going to disagree along the way. But it isn't about how you disagree. It's about how do you resolve that disagreement? And does it end the relationship or does it strengthen the relationship? So those are two big pieces. I would definitely do what I'd call batting practice or reps, and using your football term. I know you spoke about your football fan. That's how you knew my last name. But you need as many reps as you can. And I would not use those reps game time reps. I would use them as practice reps. And I talk about that, Brett, ESL is game time, not just because of the value of the businesses, but Brett, if I'm selling your business, you don't want me practicing what I'm doing in my partnerships while I'm selling your business, which is what you've worked your whole life for. So I call it game time speed when we are about to do your business. So I better have everything refined up until that point. And I've done that for years with my current partner and even all my previous partners. So you've got to have the reps in to create that faith section. You got to have the reps in to create that mission section and see if you guys can work through the differences. And remember what I said, didn't say that you're good together. I said, can you work through the differences and realize where you complement each other?
Gosh, that's another one. I think that's another book for yours right there. If you haven't already wrote the book yet, right? That's such wisdom there. And I'm also wondering about, like, when you say batting practice, like that makes sense. And so someone might be listening and saying, okay, that's great. So what does that look like? I mean, is that we can start with golf. We can play some basketball. We do some jujitsu, like, maybe some lower level stuff, right? It's competition. It can be heated, or we're playing on the team there. Move to the next level. Like maybe we're doing a real estate deal together, right? Or maybe we're doing some kind of investment together, or like walk us through like kind of what you mean by that.
Sure. So the batting practice
yeah.
or the reps, what I mean by that is if you're going to do a real estate transaction with someone, I would find the least expensive transaction with the least amount of downside and the least exposure, right? So why would I go do a $10 million piece of real estate with somebody new versus maybe doing something small or trying to replicate the real estate? Maybe we buy something else together, but the smallest ticket amount. That's what I meant by batting practice Brett, is it's just less risk. Doing things that have a little bit of risk before you jump into bed to put it all on the line together.
There it is. That put it all together for me. Thank you so much, Lee, for that one. We're going to wrap it up here. Just last couple questions, and we'll be out, Lee. So, number one book you recommend or gifted the most in the past year?
Grit, no question. I have recommended Grit. That is an amazing book. The title speaks for itself. So I would definitely look up GRIT. Grit is the book that I would recommend.
Awesome. Question for you. Never Split the Difference, Chris Voss, as a negotiator yourself, doing it all the time. What are your thoughts on that book and that training? Have you had a chance to dive into that?
Yeah, so I had the fortune of knowing Chris. He's amazing. He has come many, many, many years ago before I got popular in social media. Brett, I'm fortunate to have traveled the world, some of the coolest people on the West Coast. I got back from Switzerland at the top detox spa, meeting a few people out there. Chris and I met many, many years ago before he got as uber popular as he did. So I know Chris firsthand. I've spent time with Chris in person well before his huge popularity. You don't have to say another word. Everything Chris says and does is amazing.
Absolutely. And by the way, mirroring and labeling, right? I mean, I've listened to the masterclass that Chris has put on it's called The Art of Negotiation. I read the book and, I got some of it. I listened to some of the podcasts, got some of it, right? I listened to an Audible, got some of it. But it wasn't until I took the masterclass and then I could I'm a very hands-on, tactile, type of communicator, right? So I think most people are in general, right? You're going to actually see it. And I'm like, wow, it's so rich. So I don't know if you can just do maybe even just 30 seconds, 90 seconds on mirroring and labeling and the importance of being able to connect with the person on the other side before you're proposing whatever you're proposing.
So, it's funny, Brett. I'm going to embarrass myself. I wish I had a better answer for you. So, I am. This is so ignorant of me, and I'm embarrassed, Brett. But I'm going to expose myself with you here. I'm not a giant book reader, although I've read just a handful. I love Malcolm Gladwell as well. Tipping Point. I love. There's no coincidences. But Brett, I have operated in my life the mirroring, everything that Voss says. I am not cognizant of how I behave and what I do. I literally am the worst person to describe how to do something because I do everything from gut. You remember how I mentioned my partner does everything strategically? So there's a great partnership there. I have not read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective and all these other books. I just know how I like to be treated myself, and I tend to focus on treating others exactly if I were sitting on the other side. So, Brett, I wish it was more cognizant of myself and more conscious. It's not. I'm a terrible person to ask how to do it. Just be with me, and maybe you can pick up some things. Is that a fair way to
That's a
put
good
it?
answer though. That makes sense, Some people it is more intuitive and some people it's not, right? And some people it's just more natural, some it's not. So I think that's so good. I love the answer. And then this is just the last question. After all your success, helping all the people you've helped, Lee, how do you best stay centered in your values and stay encouraged to charge forward to reach even higher heights after you've accomplished so much?
Oh goodness. Well, so I'm pretty high because I'm walking around with my own 2 feet every day. And I'll tell you, Brett, one nugget. I started my career 30 years ago for a couple years as a physical therapist. I had a master's degree in physical therapy. My favorite career, but I hated that people were the product. And when I was able to work with traumatic brain injury, geriatric, pediatric, when I'm able to take care of people that will take you and I, Chris, I'm going to use an analogy. We might get up and go to the bathroom and take us, 30 seconds, right? Or whatever it may be, a minute. But when you have people that might have to take 15 minutes to do a simple task or 25 to 30 minutes if they have to do a task, when you spend 2 years working in that world with people that have such great energy and positivity, but the challenges physically to them are so difficult. Ever since that career, I wake up every day and I'll end on my secret. Here's my secret. I thought about it the other day. My business partner and I were in Switzerland starving at the top detox spa in the world, doing the fast. And he laughed at me and said, "Look, I've spent enough time with you. We have no food here. We're drinking tea with no food. How are you in a positive mood? And we're dying here, sitting in the middle of the Alps." And I said, "Yeah, I never really thought about that, I guess." And I said, "You know what it is? Here's what it is. I always think of 2 to 3 things, Brett, that would be worse. So whenever there's a challenge going on in my life, and again, this is just my gut reaction. I've got some detox tea. That's all I've got. I'm starving. I'm thinking, well, I could have no detox tea and just plain water. This is delicious tea now. Wait a minute. I could be on a dry fast, having no water, no detox tea, and walking in those mountains, having to get up somewhere to get shelter. I can think of 3, 4, 5 things that are worse than what I'm doing. And when I do that, I tend to appreciate, no matter how bad it is, I tend to appreciate whatever little joy that I can glean from whatever experience. So I hope I answered it accurately, or just I answered whatever, but I was giving you my knee jerk reaction.
You did, Lee Heisman. You did so much more. I want to thank you for being on the show. I feel like our guest absolutely connected. You had a ton of value. I want to encourage you to keep using your strengths of positive energy, positive outlook, and actually in 5x the smiles for everyone today. And be thinking about Lee in the Alps, sitting, starving himself, fasting.
True. True.
When the next time that you're feeling a little bit, down, perhaps, right? Maybe that gives you a smile.
Brett, I forgot to tell you, I didn't tell listeners, and you always ask me, it's hard for me to promote myself, and I do have a TV show called The Roadmap, and it's on Apple TV, and it's on Hulu, and I do forget about these things. I try not to do social media, but my junior analyst runs my LinkedIn for me, and LinkedIn's a great place to see all of my videos, but I forget. I tend to wear t-shirts around that I have a friend make me, and we own the domains, Brett. If someone wants to know what their business value is, what's your EBITDA? that we own What's Your EBITDA, and we own what You Had Me at EBITDA. And I tend to wear those t-shirts around town. My wife has forbid me from wearing any EBITDA t-shirt that I wear in the airport, because I will have 15 people grab me, high five me, like, I know that. So if anybody is looking to look at their value, look up what's your EBITDA.com, or you had me at EBITDA.com, and it'll go to a valuation page on our website, and we can help determine and give you some guidance.
There is Lee Heisman. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Go to those websites, check Lee out. Also, if we could help you at all, go to capitalgainstaxers.com to plan your exit plan. Before you go with Lee to sell your business for $100 million, make sure you have a plan in place to defer that capital gains tax, eliminate that estate tax as well. And I want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build to Billions podcast. Again, we're on this journey with you, right, to scale from millions to billions. And we want to encourage you to also have a mindset every single day of stewardship over ownership, and figure out a way to continue to compound your wealth and your life so you can give more all of it away. Appreciate everyone listening to the podcast or watching on YouTube. We'll talk to everyone again real soon. Bye now.